what the psychedelics seem to me to argue for is that reality is not reality. There may be no reality, but certainly this is not it. This is some kind of highly provisional, culturally sanctioned hallucination that we are all participating in. And whatever it is, it yields ultimately to non-entity. I mean, our realities are sustained by our being. And from looking at what happens to other people, we know that eventually you get laid into the cold, cold ground. And then what is your reality worth? So reality, whatever it is temporary and yields to non-existence. That seems to be the primary ground of being. Yeah, over here. Well, I think that what it points us toward, and this is where modern philosophy in large measure has gone, is realizing that the primacy of language, that it's up until fairly recently, people have accepted the idea that you're born into the world and that's the world, and then you make the best of it. It's the hand you've been dealt. But what they didn't understand was that this is a card game where you never have to show your hand. So you can claim to be holding 8 aces. You can claim any damn thing you want. Reality is made out of language. Some people understand this and use it to bully the rest of us. I mean, we think, you have to show your cards, and they know that you just claim to have aces and 8s, and everybody gets out of your way. So, as a culture, what we have to do is, and I'm definitely not big on this whole French thing, but nevertheless, there is something to be said for this deconstructionist method. We have to get down to the bedrock of reality, which appears to be words, means, and ideas, and then build back up from that. We can, otherwise, what we get is the momentum of past error. We think of the people in the past as tremendously naive relative to ourselves, but it's their intellectual world that we're living in, because they thought up all this stuff. And then we are acting out the consequences of it. How can we take control of the reality-creating machinery and then direct it in a way we want to go? No culture on earth has ever done this, or even conceived of the idea, so far as I can tell. There's a lot of fun poked at feminism for its preference for words like chairperson and stuff like that. And these examples seem somewhat trivial. But in fact, the effort to reconstruct the language is very genuine, because thought can't go where the roads of language have not been built. So you decide where you want to go, and then you build a linguistic path there. This whole thing with the psychedelic experience, the way cultures lose touch with it is by not being able to say anything about it, And then it eventually gets so unsayable that if you start babbling about it, they throw a net over you and say, oh, well, he became schizophrenic. They had serious delusions, had to be locked up, didn't understand that the universe is, a half sphere on the back of a turtle being carried by a dwarf, or whatever the sanctioned cultural reality is. So our political dilemma and our cultural dilemma is a linguistic dilemma. And we need to take hold of language and build it consciously. Now, so far, the only people who have understood this very thoroughly have been bad people, fascists, and other people with some hideous agenda that they wanted to displace the ordinary, haphazard way of doing cultural business with. But it is not intrinsically compromised. It's simply that the sly among us figured this out ahead of all the rest of us. But we can learn from them and can begin to sanction realities that never existed before. I mean, you've probably all heard me talk about memes and how the reason I teach, the reason I write, the reason we all get together is because we're trying to launch new memes. You all know what a meme is, right? A meme is the smallest unit. This is how I define it. Somebody told me recently, you define it wrong. It's all right. My definition is better. A meme is the smallest unit of an idea, in the same way that a gene is the smallest unit of organismic existence. So the meme of Marxism is made up of sub-memes of class struggle and return of the means of production to the workers and so forth and so on. These are Marxist memes.
So I don't understand why you're kind of getting under the point that it's language based. Why can't this meme be visual?
Well, I define language so broadly that it can be visual. I mean, what it is it's the signifier for cognitive activity. And I don't want to get off into this kind of linguistic vocabulary about this stuff, but language means dance, sculpture, painting, poetry, song. It means cognitive activity. I mean, this is the glory of our species. This is what we do so much better than whoever's in second place. I mean, I guess the gorillas and the dolphins are a mile and a half behind doing whatever they're doing. But I just don't buy the notion that there is any other species on this planet, with the possible exception of mushrooms, that is involved in this language-making enterprise in quite the way we are. And it's how we escaped the iron constraints of organic existence. Culture is a kind of environment that we have learned how to interpose between ourselves and whatever is really out there. And we don't know what it was because we invented culture 50,000 years ago, and nobody's seen anything else since. But there was something there that was so frightening and so alarming to us that we invented culture as a membrane that we would place between ourselves and it. And then there have been other membranes invented since. Urbanization. Let's all crowd into cities and jabber to each other. That will hold it even more at bay. And so forth and so on. I mean, we really behave as though we fear something tremendously toxic or something which has a dissolving force over our being that lies beyond the frontier of language. And this relates to the ego. The ego is this cultural invention that we have created. People don't need egos. I mean, you need one in this culture because everybody else has one, and so you have to use yours to navigate through it. But it's not a necessary concomitant to being human. We could operate without them. But somehow we became traumatized by the experience of raw, unlanguaged nature, and we created this strategy. And it's no different than, I mean, some creatures create nests underground, and some creatures coat themselves in toxic slime. We also did that, by the way, because there's something that has to be held back and suppressed that's very alarming.
It seems to me that you're, on one point you're saying that, we're way ahead of the dolphins because we created this linguistic-based, thing. And on the other hand, I see it as, you've also just said that we've created this linguistic-based hallucination that's isolated us from a perceptual-based, I hesitate to use the word reality, but whatever you want to call it. And so why is this culture an improvement?
Well, I'm not saying it's an improvement. It's an experiment of some sort. No other creature ever took this particular tack. Now, evolution seems to have its own set of values. What evolution is seeking to maximize is expression of the individual genome. In other words, there are two ways that a species can be successful. It can either evolve into an unoccupied niche of some sort that it then can tenaciously take hold of, or it evolves strategies for generalizing its existence so that it can occupy all sorts of niches. And this is what we've done. And when you look at the two possibilities, you see that creatures which follow the maximize adaptation to a single niche strategy usually become blocked. Cockroaches are a good example. Evolutionarily, we could say that they are tremendously successful, but all they do is persist. They haven't modified or changed themselves in 150 million years.
By your definition, if there's more cockroach genes out there than human genes, they're more successful than us.
Well, not my definition, but the definition of biology, and cockroaches are always held up as this tremendously successful evolutionary adaptation. We have set out on a different course, and it's a course of continual redefinition. We can retool our culture very quickly. We have thrown away the mechanisms of genetic change and natural selection through modification of mutation, which was very, very slow and apparently a random walk. It didn't have any kind of telos. But cultures can actually set up goals and move toward them. Very large and unlikely goals. Like the Third Reich, their decision that it would be a good idea to eliminate Jews from Central Europe. And this is a crazy idea. It would never happen. Nothing like that would ever happen in a situation of organic evolution. But in a situation of cultural evolution, the idea becomes the guiding image for the society, and then outrageous things are done, and the consequences of that are played out. I would like to think that we have not escaped from the yoke, the controlling yoke of nature. In other words, we aren't off on some demonic tear where we are just like evil incarnate, but that actually nature requires a species such as ourselves to basically to harness energy. We are on a higher level doing what the mitochondria did in the abiotic oceans of the earth 1 billion years ago. We're energy storage and release mechanisms sanctioned by nature for some purpose, which will be visible somewhere downstream in the flow of time, but which is opaque to us. For us, history seems a kind of a nightmare, but it must, I think, have a happy ending, or it would never have been allowed to happen in the first place. I just don't think that a monkey species had the wherewithal to evade the mechanisms of control and constraint that guide and direct everything on the planet. There is a purpose to history, and, I don't want to go into it tonight, but as many of you know, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, trying to figure out something good about the human race, something that can be said of us that will redeem the sins that we have visited upon the planet. And it isn't easy, but some of our best people are working on it. You know what I mean?
If in fact part of what we are is the unveilment of the world or nature, as you're referring to now.
Well, maybe what's going on is that nature, you see, we as individuals can remember the past and model the future. But it may be that nature operates in an entirely different way. This harks back to our discussion of Platonism. Nature may have a kind of viewpoint in eternity. Nature may actually see what needs to be done and can plan on a scale of 1 million or 100 million years. So that, well, this is slightly afield, but it keeps coming up, so it's worth talking about. Every body in the solar system, all of the inner planets, all of their moons, all of the solid bodies that orbit around the gas giants in the outer solar system, every piece of rock in the entire solar system has just been hammered to pieces by asteroid and planetesimal infall. And we prefer not to think about this. As recently as last January, what's called an Apollo asteroid crossed within a half lunar distance of the Earth. This is hair-raisingly close. And there's this crater out in Arizona. It's only 50,000 years old. Whatever came down there was only about 30 feet across, and everything within 800 miles died instantly when that thing came down. There's a scar on the Canadian shield larger than the crater Copernicus on the moon. Now, this crater is over 1.5 billion years old. The point being, the universe may be a fantastically chaotic and dangerous place. And so our cheerful model of what biology is about is that, we've evolved over 1.5 billion years, and we have 1 billion years more, and there's no hurry, and it's all fine, and man has thousands of years to work out the problems of civilization and so forth and so on.
Sirenita de los ríos, danza, danza con el viento. Con tus flores y aromas perfumas los corazones. Con tus flores y aromas perfumas los corazones. Cura, cura, cuerpecitos, limpia, limpia, espirititos. Cura, cura, cuerpecitos, limpia, limpia, espirititos. Cantaremos sicaritos, abuelita curandera. Cantaremos muy juntitos, sirenita provenzana. Dai dai da da dai dai da da dai dai da da dai 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 da da.